Hello and welcome to another virtual session from the NFA technical area. Today's session, Amanda and Joe will look at the foundation phase and how to meet the needs of players from 5 to 11. They also will look at your approach as coaches to the return to football and how you can keep players engaged from this. Hope you enjoy.
Level. In the foundation phase, obviously the fitness isn't as much of a concern and they bounce back pretty quickly. But when we are planning our sessions and we're getting them involved, we just need to be a little bit mindful of that it's for some of them the coming back into this has been a big impact on their bodies. So in the YDP phase that I'm working with, we're seeing a lot of shin splints starting and a lot of injuries coming back because they weren't doing enough and they've come back to a full program and are now really struggling with little knocks and niggles. So it's how do we manage that when we come back into it, and that these things are going to happen and we just need to be aware that might happen and that's okay, and how we manage that and how we manage our sessions is just a thing to start thinking about for what we're planning to do. So because we're talking about the foundation phase, we love this quote from Pete Sturgis. He is our main lead in the foundation phase. And we all know that coaching is a unique opportunity. And we all know that there is no better time to influence a child's attitude to sport than in their early years. Myself and Joe, coming from the education sector, are so big on this that we understand that the impact that physical activity has on positive mental health, on positive health for our children as they grow up, and really get them to buy into any types of physical activity as young as possible is absolutely brilliant for them. And being in that coaching opportunity, that we need to do everything we can to ensure that they stay doing some form of physical activity. It might not be football, and that's okay, but if we give them opportunities to seek out different types of physical activity and enjoy it by delivering some real high quality sessions that are fun, that are engaging, that want them to come back, then we can have a real positive influence on what they do and what and how they perceive sport and the games that they want to play and they seek out to compete in moving forward. But when we're working with children, we really need to consider the relationship between these two areas. So how sport, physical activity and the game of football links to the developing child. So you guys working in that foundation phase with these young children, we know that our children have different start points, and that, like Luke spoke about, that the gap between his have grown significantly with COVID, and that the children developing in this time some have excelled and have absolutely loved the online learning. Some have really struggled with that. So the managing the difference between the two and the relationship that we've got to think about between the two is probably a little bit more challenging than it was in the pre-COVID world. So those social interactions, that ability to share, to deal with conflict resolution, that might be really challenging for them because they've been in this period of isolation. So we might have to highlight those and help those areas a little bit more for our children. Anything you want to jump in with that, Joe?
Nearly didn't unmute myself. Cardinals in that one. I think just the thing with that as well is to not feel rushed to move past this reconnection phase. So we've only been, sports is just about a month, isn't it? 4 weeks almost to the day, with grassroots football being back outside. And if you started in that first week, you've possibly only seen those players now 3, maybe 4 times if you had a session yesterday. And out of that time, again, I'll come back to this. It's all relevant to all your different contexts, but I think it's about being realistic with where have we got to in 4 weeks, and actually how should we be moving quicker? Should we spend lots more time in that connection phase? And that's definitely something that I've learned myself over the last few weeks, even with older players, is not rushing it. We're still a way off the next season, and we've got time to help them rebuild those connections, to feel more confident, and to really take the time to notice some of those differences, not just in terms of groups, but individuals within those groups where you can.
Playing around at training and messing up a little bit because they haven't seen each other. It's only to be expected at that age, but there's a lot more positives are coming out of it. I say I can't think of a single negative at the moment that I've had since we've been back in the last month.
Brilliant. I think everyone's context is different, and like I manage the academy, which has got 5 teams, and my under 10s are exactly the same. Not a bother. Everyone's absolutely fine. But then my 14s are really challenging, and I think it is sort of almost like the luck of the draw with the children that you've got in there and how they come back. So I think there will be some real positive stories, and like I said, they're just absolutely buzzing to play football and to see their mates and to get involved with that. And it's also great. So what can we do to get rid of some of that excess energy? And for some of it might be that behaviour management bit as well of, okay, right, now I've got to go back to the basics of, right, when I'm talking, you need to listen, and whatever that might look like, because they're just so excited. And what can we do as coaches to get them to re-engage and listen and be safe in doing so, but still keep it fun and engaging? So yeah, great point. So it isn't all negative. There is some real positives, and then it's how do we manage that and what that looks like. Has anybody else got any other ideas before we move on this one?
I mean, as a positive, aside from one of my teams, last week I've given my players 10-minute coaches corner where they become the coach for 10 minutes. And one of my really shy players, I picked on him first. They pick on him, but I was like, he was first volunteer. And the difference in him, he was confident, delivered a session on free kicks, talked about the techniques, and all of his teammates sat and listened to him better than they'd ever listened to me. And to see the respect that they all had for him and the bravery and stuff, and they all gave him a round of applause when it was all done. So considering how quickly he returned to football, for him to take that and do that, and now they've all got the bug for it. When I asked who's next, every single player put their hands up. I think
that's brilliant. I think that's really interesting, because I think, you know, since they've been on this online teaching world, I think they've got more confident at doing and delivering bits because they're being asked to do that a little bit more in school, and because it's not in front of people, they've had a practice of doing that, and now when they are in front of people, they've got this newfound confidence to actually, I'm okay doing this. I've done this online, so I'm ready to do that in real life. That's a brilliant example. Love that. Brill. If there's nothing else, we'll move this along, because we want to sort of share some of these ideas with you. So first and foremost, let's re-engage with your players, and you've had three weeks back in with them, and that re-engagement of that chatting and that talking to and building those relationships back again is absolutely key. You know, they're just buzzing to see you a lot of the time. They want to find out what you've been doing and what that looks like, and making sure we get that reconnection with our players. But us in the foundation phase as well, it's also the parents. I've been really surprised at how many parents want to have a conversation with me, and I wasn't expecting that. But for them as well, it's, you know, that I'm probably one of the only places that they're going to be able to go to at the moment with their children. So we're in this really unique opportunity that people are socializing, but football's one of the areas that they're really allowed to do it. So coming to have a chat with me and talk about what their child's been doing and really start to re-engage and build those connections is what we're sort of really advocating. That fun before the fitness and the formations, making sure we are really emphasising the fun part of football again. We sort of you've seen the horror stories of first session back of people just running laps and all of that sort of side of things to build their fitness back up. Not what we're advocating at all. It should be all about that fun part of football again, and that real importance of working across the FA4 corner model in the sessions that we're delivering, making sure we've got elements of all of that in the sessions so that we can really help our kids re-engage with what we're doing. Because some of them might have had a little bit of time out, we really need to help them to fall in love with the game again. They might have spent a little bit too much time in front of the TV, playing video games, etc. And we need to really get them to fall back in love with football in this short period that we have between now and the end of the season, to really hope that they come back and continue their journey with us, and making sure that they really want to come back and engage in what we're doing. But when we look at the long-term goal of what we're doing here with our foundation phase, it's really important that these are the building blocks to go on and to do bigger things. So we've got the under-17s when they won the World Cup in India. This doesn't happen overnight, and it starts with their very first experiences of football and what that looks like. So what we're hoping to do is share a couple of ideas of the key messages that we're looking for in this foundation phase and how we can bring that to life a little bit. So in this group now in the chat box again, or unmute yourselves. What has been your focus on return to football and why? What's worked really well with your group of players? I know Luke's just shared about his coach corner, which is a great idea. Absolutely love that. Has anyone got any other ideas that they want to share of things that they've done with their players that has been really, really beneficial, that they've really, really enjoyed, or what your focus is going to be in your context between now and the end of the season, because everyone might be slightly different?
I've tried the social thing, and that's had various. I've been sort of mildly, not totally successful with the social thing, I'm afraid, because one group I've got, there's a clique of lads from one school, and I've sort of tried to integrate them. But more positive, I've done a lot of the Pete Sturgis stuff on trying to keep control of the ball and, you know, not becoming a better dribbler rather than a better passer, because my natural inclination is to focus on passing, I'm afraid. But I've done quite a lot of stuff on that, and I've had a couple of sessions where, yeah, like, I mean, I've worked with Keith before, and Keith said to me years ago about, you know, £1 million player is the dribbler, you know, not the passer necessarily. And I've read a lot of stuff recently about, you know, the best passers are also very good dribblers. Yeah. So I've done a lot of stuff, a lot of the games, dribbling games, and sort of just rewarded the kids for keeping on the ball and dribbling. So that's been quite successful. The other Friday, 3 of them sort of almost dribbled around the other 4 kids and scored a goal. Brilliant. So yeah, so that's.
How have the players enjoyed that? Like, have they taken more from it, do you think, from the sessions? How have they engaged with the sessions with that switch? Have they found it more enjoyable to having them with a ball each, that sort of element? How's that affected them?
Yeah, well, I've always tried a lot of stuff with the ball each, but just sort of just keeping the theme, like tonight's dribbling, and then the next night was dribbling, and then we had, you know, not going to do it every week, obviously. But then the third week, it was just like we had a little mini tournament with the year group below. And so, like, breaking them up into 4v4s maximum.
Lots of time the ball. Yeah.
Yeah, and just keep lots of time the ball, ignoring passing, ignoring tackling. And one lad the other week, the ball was bouncing. I could see he was about to whack it, and he brought it down and just controlled it. And I just sort of, I don't know what happened next, but I just took him off and said, "Well done for not whacking it."
Yeah.
I could see that was his first thought originally, but yeah.
Yeah, great to hear that that's what you've been trying with and seeing some real benefits out of it as well. Anybody else got any others that they want to share? I'm struggling to see the player just wants to play matches rather than train. Yeah, really interesting actually. That's a really good point, Robert, that I have to admit for the first couple of weeks that I came back, I just did small-sided games with them. I wasn't worried about anything else. I just set them up into little small-sided games and just let them go, and then I just put different constraints on the small-sided games for them, so that everything was about them playing as they saw it as matches. There was a purpose to it, but they were just playing games. That's interesting. Calm down activity at the start to get them to listen. Yeah, brilliant. So putting them straight into a game, Robert, just letting them burn off that energy and come back into the session after they've had 10-15 minutes of running around playing that before starting some other activities. Yeah, some really good ideas that are flying around with there. Joe, are you back with us? Have you joined us again?
Yeah, sorry, I'm having a bit of a nightmare with the internet. It's been fine actually all day, and then today it decides to do it. I think for me as well, linked a bit to what we just chatted about around confidence and staying on the ball. I think that's been a big one, certainly for the group that I've been working with. And but over the summertime last year, it was probably a bit easier because kids were outside, they were playing, even if it was just in their back garden or against a wall or whatever. There was loads and loads of stuff on Twitter and all those videos, and all of a sudden it became winter and dark and wet and cold, and you saw a lot less. So I think this time round it's certainly different, and I've definitely one of my focus, even if they're naturally a defensive sort of person, and I know we're talking foundation phase here, so they're playing everywhere and getting loads of experience, but everybody needs to be comfortable with the ball at their feet, no matter where they might be, whether they're in the goal or whether they're slightly higher up the pitch or they're in a sticky little situation, they've got to work their way out of it. So I'm totally with you on that one. That's definitely something I'm going to be sticking with for a while, probably. As much as I can, whilst building in other little things.
Well, okay.
I've added in movement is what my focus has been on for the minute. So we always focus on staying on the ball. That's my philosophy, has been for years. But this time I've done movement and everything's about me. So far I think I've done football, netball, hockey and basketball in my coaching sessions just so far, because I want to focus on them moving in different ways. And that's been what I've been trying to do.
I love that idea. I'm all about multi-sports. I'm all about them getting exposures to different ways of doing things, because at this point it is just about that movement patterns and encouraging them to move in different ways and different things, and really highlighting those experiences with them. Sturgis game called No Going Back. We're going to watch a few bits of this and talk about how we can manipulate different ideas to really bring out some of those foundation phase messages of staying on the ball, and how we can put some constraints on our sessions to really encourage our players to do this. So I will let you watch this, and then me and Joe will unpick it a little bit for you.
The score is 10-10. So this has been a great game, hasn't it? 10-10, but if you are in this middle area, so you see the white line of cones and the white line of cones, this is the middle area. If you pass the ball back from this middle area, your team loses a goal. You can score in the normal way, so you can add to your 10 goals, but if you are in this middle area and I'm a blue and kicking that way, if I pass the ball back, it now becomes 10-9 to the yellow team. If you are the yellow team and you get the ball here and you can't shoot, you can lay it back to somebody there from this area. If you do it from here, you lose a goal. If I'm a blue player and I'm in here and I'm kicking that way and I can pass back to my goalie and he can then go forward, you're allowed to do that. But if you pass it into your goalie from here, you lose a goal. You can pass it back to your goalkeeper in that end one. Oh. 11-10. Eventually, I'm going to stop square passes as well, but I'll allow that one. Oh, love it. 11-11. Play. Oh. Right, coaches. One of the things we're really trying to work on with the DNA is just booting the ball away. So as hard as it's going to be, yeah, from now on, if anybody just kicks the ball out, you lose a goal. When we restart from the sides, you can dribble in or pass in, all right? But you wouldn't do that because you'll lose a goal. But what I wanted to try and think about is there's not much space here, but there's loads here. So I can actually bring the ball back here. I've got now time to look forward, and now we can play. Off you go. Good boy. Only if he needs it.
Yes.
Your position, having the ball there off the goalie, was a brilliant position. He didn't pass the ball to you, but that was a great place to stand. Yeah. No offsides. Were you the player that had the ball here? You did absolutely brilliantly. If you get the ball here, because I'm asking the goalkeepers to roll it out short, and you go under pressure, yeah, so you can pressure me, you can do exactly what you did, which was some brilliant work with you travelling with the ball. If you take the ball into this area, and I'm a yellow, I can actually pass back to the goalkeeper because I'm in that area. It's this area that we don't need to pass back. So you've now got two things you can think about doing. You can do your brilliant dribble and travel with the ball, but you can also use your goalkeeper. I don't mind it being a little bit false in the foundation phase if, when they get into the older age groups and they're under pressure, they've got so much more capability on the ball. But they won't get it if we don't hold our nerve and we keep reinforcing, play the way you face, play the easy ball. We've got to change that mantra, because at the highest level, it's not going to win you anything. Players of this age, well, you've seen how good they are. They can pass the ball back and play the easy ball with their eyes shut. I want to build more capacity and capability onto that so that they've got that one if they want it, which is the easy one, but they've got 4 or 5 other things that they're really comfortable in doing as well. So you've got to start using your brains now. You are allowed to travel into this area and pass back. All right? Oh! What a great place to stand. Coaches, what a great place to stand. He's immediately giving himself 2 options, because he can play back to the goalkeeper or he can play forward. In the foundation phase, because the goal is at that end and that's where we're going to score, I will dribble into traffic just because it takes me nearer that goal. That's one of the things we've got to change, because in this situation, where's the space? The space is actually there. So why do I dribble into traffic when all the space is here? You might lose the ball if you dribble into the crowd, but you've got less chance of losing it if you dribble into space. That's why we have pass the ball in or dribble it in. It's so that I can look at the players and say, do they know where the space is on the pitch? Because the first principle of playing the game, an invasion game, is understanding space. So if I'm dribbling into a crowd just because I want to score that way, I'm ignoring the fact that all the space is over here. That's why we say you can dribble in. But I'm looking at the players to see who understands where the spaces are, and would they take that option even if it's not towards the opponent's goal.
Okay, I'm going to hold it there on that bit of video. Just some reflections from me when I've watched this a good number of times now, and I still can't believe the difference in the players over that short period of the session, from the first start of the session, watching them play the game, to them really getting to understand it, to them then dribbling into the space and finding where it is, and the interventions that Pete does to allow that to happen is absolutely brilliant. And I think when I've watched this and then gone to deliver some sessions, it's really changed the language that I use with my players. So I'm looking for them to, where's the space? What does that look like for them? And there's those little tweaks in your language of, instead of saying, like we were saying before, about passing it or dribble it, just saying to them, where's the space? And encouraging them to make the decision of what they want to do in that area, and whether that is a dribble or looking for them to encourage them to play the ball forward, really helps them. And you see some fantastic stuff that they can be able to then do at the end of it, just by changing a few of the constraints that you put on the game. It looks like a game of football. They think they're playing a match, but you're just tweaking different bits to get out some of the ideas that you want to bring out with that game. Joe, have you got any ideas, any reflections on this one?
Yeah, a bit like you, I've seen that a few times now, and I pick up on different little bits every time. And one thing I certainly noticed is around the area that he uses and how he lays out the space. I think one of the things that is quite common to see, and I've certainly done it loads of times, is where you split your game into thirds, which Pete hasn't technically done because he split it into 3, but he's used a bigger middle section. And I think we can be a bit more creative in how we use the spaces that we've got with our younger players to bring out the outcomes that we want to see. For example, so if we've given them too tight a space and we want them to stay on the ball, well, maybe just by extending the space, all of a sudden that might change the dynamic and how they're moving. And I think something that I've tried to bring into my own practice, you heard him mention about halfway through around the young lad who kicks the ball away. And he says about, if you kick the ball away, you lose a goal, which, really effective way to encourage players to stay on the ball. But I think what you can also do is reward the effort and the energy that they've taken to try and stay on the ball. So they still might be unsuccessful, but actually they've made the effort, and that can be rewarded in really simple ways, like they get an extra ball to go and score, or they get, they're the point, they get an extra point, or whatever it might be. And being creative in how we reward the effort and the energy that they're putting into what they're doing, rather than are they successful at what we want them to do, but rewarding the process that they've gone through. A little bit like how he highlights the player who stands in a really good position. That's somebody who recognises space. Okay, they're not on the ball, but it's rewarded in a similar way as to somebody else who might be on the ball.
I've seen this been delivered not by Pete but by somebody else, and I think the pitch size whenever you deliver this type of game is really, really important, because if the pitch is too small or too narrow or not long enough and they haven't got space to dribble into, it really changes the dynamic of the game. So if you're trying to do these really key messages of staying on the ball, make sure that your pitch isn't too small or too big, because if it's too small, obviously they haven't got the space, they've got players on top of them all the time. If it's too big, it's too easy to stay on the ball. So depending on whether it's being successful or not when you're delivering it, really think about the size of the pitch and the space that you're using, and tweak that just to help your players to stay on the ball and get those outcomes for it.
Yeah, and also this sort of setup, just before we move on, is I found it really useful in helping teach them about, if they're getting towards the older age groups, about offsides and that sort of thing. So you can use, because in this setup here we've got a bigger middle area and almost end zones before the goal, you can introduce the idea of being offside, a bit similar to netball, for example, Luke, that you said you played that. If you cross the line, that line of white cones there before the ball is played, you're offside. Okay, that's not really how the offside rule works, but it's starting to introduce the concept. So when we're going from different formats of the game and different rules of the game, that your setup of your practice can really help with that. Certainly in a school setting, it massively helped when the offside rules and things just kind of go over people's head a little bit. But that's definitely something I've taken away and used quite a few times.
And I think with the younger foundation phase players as well, just having this game, but having it as lots of 1v1 situations. So having them with one player that's marking them, so they're not playing against a whole team, and using the third of the pitch to encourage them to find the space in that third. So especially with our under sixes and our under eights, that they don't have to recognise it as a full pitch. They can recognise where the space is in a section, and have multiple balls going at different times to really encourage them to think about where that space is, and only have to worry about their one defender that they're working with. For the younger age groups is a nice adaptation of the game as well. Element of it, but again, after they've had that real success, and it's encouraging all the others to get on the ball and do the same thing. So there's so many different variations of that real basic setup that you can do with it. And I think it's really important that both these games that we've shown are games, they have got goals at either side of it. And this is what we talked about, that they want to play the matches, and that's absolutely fine. We can get out some amazing outcomes by allowing them to play matches in inverted commas, and we can really highlight some of the key stuff that we think is important as well, and they don't get the different challenges that you give them really keeps them engaged, so they don't get bored after 15-20 minutes as we know some of our players do, because they're just playing a game. They're more interested to see what's going on the other side of the football pitch, and whatever it keeps them thinking, using their brains, and staying a bit more engaged in the session that you're delivering as well. Okay, taking us through the top tips, Jo.
Yeah. So this is kind of really pulled from a few different colleagues, something that we've brought together, and some of it we've already talked about already. And I think it tries to summarise a bit of some of the points that we've shared and the ideas that you've shared with each other. But one of the challenges we've set to people is how many of these different things can you get into your session, and I think one thing that leads on from what you were just saying, Amanda, around those two things we've shown are games or practices or whatever you want to call them, and it's not that in the top right corner. There are no laps, no lines, no lectures, and I think we can probably all relate to that. To go, actually, that's not what they really enjoy, and even so more now when they've had all that time off, and how quickly can we get them going, and whilst there's nothing fundamentally wrong with running around the pitch twice, but there are so many other things that we can do to re-engage players right from the beginning. Even if it's, if perhaps I've certainly been in that situation. I know a number of different people have, where, you get onto the Astro at 6 o'clock, not 1 minute before. So you're there at 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock, whenever your time starts. and all the kids are already there and you have no time to set anything up. And kids can be quite resourceful in the fact they say, right, well, here you go, find yourself a partner or a 3, here's 4 cones and a ball, go and play a game, create a game, or go and play a game that involves multiple touches on the ball, and they can just create it themselves. So that's what I mean by there are lots of other ways that we can get our kids going. And again, links into that second point in the middle there about using games to engage. Sometimes, you can play games where, particularly with those that aren't confident, as somebody mentioned a little bit earlier on, that everyone has a ball, but the focus of the game isn't the ball. Maybe it's like a bib tag game. So we're trying to get the bibs from somebody else, where they wear them as a tail, but actually everyone's got a ball at the same time, but no one's going to take it from you. No one's tackling you because the focus is not the ball. So it's just finding those different ways to re-engage players. Connection beating correction. I think one of our colleagues likes to use the phrase about can you catch kids in rather than catch them out? Can you catch them doing something really positive across the 4 corners? And we've mentioned before about rewarding efforts. Love the way that your energy in trying to chase down a pass or win the ball back, irrespective of whether they're successful or not. So catching them in as much as we can, even if it's just a thumbs up, a little fist bump or high five or elbow or whatever it is that we're doing at that particular point, or it's verbal, or you're catching somebody's eye. All those little things make such a massive difference. But for the players that we have, particularly at that foundation phase, where we really want to encourage all that positivity. One-to-ones with everyone are so powerful but so hard to do when you've only got that hour or 45 minutes. But as much as you can you keep a record of, right, who haven't I spoken to or really connected with in the last hour or this week or the last 2 weeks? And then that last one there on the right hand side is using this time to help our players remember what they're good at and getting them to tell each other. That's something that we certainly, Amanda and I, have taken from our education days. There's a lots of about peer assessment and reflectiveness and feedback, but we can bring that into our sessions that we have with them. And a bit like Luke, who's kind of had that coach's corner, it's a similar sort of concept to say, well, actually, we're going to buddy everybody up for this, next few weeks, and that person is your feedback buddy or your coach buddy, whatever you want to call it. And you're going to share something every week, so something that they did brilliantly, and maybe something that could be a bit better, or something that you could help them with, and it doesn't always have to come from us. And I think what's great about so many of the ways that we share with each other is taking the pressure off of us as a coach, so that we have that opportunity to do a bit like what Pete said in the video, is to stand back and notice. When we're so involved in running practices or organising, it's really, really hard to do that. So these are just some of the things that we've picked up along the way that we thought would be worth sharing with you. But certainly linking back to what Amanda said before around one of the slides said fun before fitness and formations. That's definitely the key at this foundation phase, letting them explore and us providing as many different ways that we can explore with them. I don't know if anybody else, because we've talked a little bit now, Amanda and I don't know if anybody's got some other useful tips. Doesn't have to necessarily be something massive, anything that you've tried or works really well with your particular age group that you want to unmute and share with the group.
Amanda, yeah, I'll probably use the similar sort of things that you've just been mentioning. Sometimes I go away from a session or a game and chastise myself because I perhaps haven't engaged enough with certain people across the board, and make the conscious of it next time. But I try and greet the kids, how was school, how was things, a little chat on an individual basis. I use, say, formation wise, I'm under 8s, apart from the goalkeeper. I haven't got anybody who's got a position. I've got a lad with ADHD who's my best player, and if I try and constrain him and position him, it confuses him. So it's basically go where you want, just get the ball, go where you want, do what you want. Similarly, you were saying about asking them what they do well. I've used before, after a session, I'll even ask them tell me something you did good, did well, tell me something you could do better, and tell me something that somebody else did well. So getting other organisational skills. Other weeks, I will just, before I finish, I will give each a positive aspect. You did so and so today, fantastic. When you did this term, when you were speak calling, brilliant. And I make it a little bit of a joke sometimes, because the player, I got one player, I did it the weekend, went around the entire team, you know, praising them. And the lad who'd scored 5 goals, I said he was rubbish, just as a little joking at the end of it. But yeah, try and a key thing for me is to try and have that social interaction, that engagement with them on both levels, the game level to talk about what you do, and also from a general social side of things. I mean, if I've got an instruction in a game, I'll call them over while the game's on, and little one, just whisper to them, can you try this? Can you try that? Rather than a big shout and scream.
Yeah, I think that's great. All those little tips and tricks. And I think what you've highlighted across the different ideas that you had is really understanding the players that you've got. So, and identifying that actually, you know, you've got somebody who doesn't learn in the same way as some of the other players that you've got. So actually the rules for them might need to be slightly different or adapted. In the same way that you were able to joke with that one particular player, it's about understanding who you can do that with, who you maybe wouldn't do that with, and that is so important. And I think taking that opportunity to really understand the groups that we've got is absolutely key, and that really makes us better as coaches to be able to use all that really useful information. A bit like what somebody said about the young player whose parent is suffering now from long COVID. Well, okay, we know that now, and how can we help support that player the best? It's not about making it easy for them, but it's about supporting them in the right way. But I think that's totally key. So thank you for sharing that. Has anybody got any other useful tips and tricks about reconnecting with our players?
Yeah, try and find something that they like outside of football that you can use, especially. So I have some kids who come because their parents force them to come to football, not necessarily because they love football and they want to stand around. So you find out what you watch on TV. As an example, one child will say, I love Ben 10. So for the next 20 minutes, my football session is purely based on Ben 10 characters, and the balls become Ben 10 or whatever it is. And all of a sudden this kid's playing football, and 15 minutes ago he didn't want to do it, but because I've made it something about him, it's benefited him, and it also benefits the whole session because I'm not constantly trying to engage one child or all these other kids are left onto their own devices, if that makes sense. So really key, I think, to learn about the kids outside of football stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think that's brilliant. I think, you know, where on a level 1 or a level 2 do they teach you about, you know, kids TV programs? But it's so powerful if you can find the right connection. And that might not be a TV program, it might be something completely different. But like you say, it's a way of re-engaging some players that might not be interested anymore. What was interesting, I was chatting with a colleague whose daughter plays in the team, and he goes and watches, and he was saying how you know, in the training part, if you like, so in the practices and the games and activities that they do, some of these girls are really, really engaged. But then the minute it goes to what they perceive to be a competitive match, they're not interested anymore. Yeah. They don't want to play. And he just said it's a really interesting dynamic to see, because with lots of young players, it's the reverse. All they want to do is play a match or play the full game. And I think that's I perhaps hadn't considered that myself, like how many of them actually just want to come to play the fun games where they're Ben 10 characters or Paw Patrol or whatever the current the current trend might be. I think it's been aware of that, and how do some of our players react in those different activities. I just think it's really interesting, and I love stepping back and seeing how different players react to the different things that we do. And as long as we're always learning and trying to evolve the practices that we're putting on, I think that's really key.
A couple of questions just to sneak in. You talked briefly about fitness. It's not so much a tip, but I remember from the level 1 kind of 3 or 4 years ago talking about, don't really need to worry about stretching and things like that with the younger age groups. I'm now under 10s, and I was just wondering what age group, what age do I need them to start stretching out before a session and stuff like that? Because I've noticed our under 11s do it, but I didn't know if that was something I needed to think about in the short term.
Do you want me to pick this one up, Joe?
Yeah.
So under 14s is really when they might need to start doing a little bit of mobility, but that is not static stretches. It can be dynamic and replicating game movement. There is actually very limited research out there that says that static stretching prevents injuries. There is some that say it is done purely for psychological reasons for players. So when you sometimes see people stretching out, there is actually no physiological benefit for them doing that. Within the academy setup, under 12s do not do a structured warm-up, but we start to bring it in at the under 14 level, and it is all progressive. So it's we call a warm-up being everything that happens pre-match. So it's movements that would be similar to what you would see in a game. We start with a FIFA 11, so 2 lines where we're doing a range of different mobility exercises before going into a small-sided game, which then increases in tempo, ready to start for the game at the full game for under 14s. But prior to that, we don't do anything in the academy for the under 12s. Some people like to use it as a pre-game sort of ritual to get people organised, and absolutely, if that's what your players need, you can encourage that. But in terms of having kids stood with one leg in front of the other stretching off, not required at all. And there's some really interesting research in it out there, but yeah, don't worry about it. Under 14s maybe, but anything below that, absolutely not needed.
Yeah, and fitness wise, I've just always assumed that if I keep the ball rolling 70-80% of my session, then fitness is just an accidental byproduct of that. So I've never really focused on that either. Would that be fair to say, for at least for another couple of years?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, even with the academy kids, we don't do any sort of formal S&C, so strength and conditioning work, until they get to the age of 14. We do encourage high quality movement patterns at under 12, so making sure that they can slow down and speed up effectively, so acceleration and deceleration stuff, but you can get all of that out of fun games such as Stuck in the Mud. It's literally anything that replicates that. In academies it might be done a little bit more formally, but in any other setting it can literally be games where it is replicating the movements that they see in the game, and there is no better fitness for football than playing football. So small-sided games is the best way to increase player fitness as they get older, and that is what we in our club encourage across the board, and even the first team do that. So 3-minute high intensity games is much more effective than doing repeated sprints. So
I think the only other thing to bear in mind, as if you perhaps move to a different age group, is really when they hit puberty. That's the time when obviously hormones for different boys and girls at different ages, that's when the kind of fitness thing becomes more of a they become more affected by the way that their body's changing. But we tend not to talk about it as much in the foundation phase, because that very, very rarely happens. Maybe you might get some what you might class as an early developer kind of at 11, but I wouldn't worry about it. Like Amanda says, it's like you just said it yourself as well, getting the ball rolling as much as you can, lots of running around, lots of games, lots of interactivity. That tends to be enough at that age.
Cool, thank you.
That's right. And the other thing as well, we've said to people in the past is, when do you see kids at lunchtime going out with the football and just doing a few quad stretches before they play a game? They don't do that really. They just crack on with it and off they go.
Well, that brings me on to my second question actually, which is, I've got some kids that take it really seriously. They're not doing quad stretches before lunchtime football, but one of my other questions was going to be quite how to manage the kids that are really, really competitive, to the point where the game at the end of a session can be quite destructive for all the good that I've managed to do in the hour previous. And I don't want to take it out of them, and it's good that they've got some competitiveness, but I find it difficult to allow them to find a balance and lose a meaningless game at the end of a session 7-6 and go away happy. I'm struggling to be able to for that to happen, and therefore the end of the session is always a little bit deflated for some kids, and I can't quite work out how to do that. If I was to take the match away, there would be uproar because that's what that's, again, as you said, that's all they're talking about from the moment they arrive. But I'm struggling to get them to balance their competitive nature with, you know, just having a fun time.
Yeah, I think it's a really hard one, and I don't think there's a magic wand answer to it. There's lots of different things you can try. One, for example, could be flipping it round so you play the match first, so then they get that bit out of the way, and then so you don't actually end with a game. You end with something, you know, a fun activity. Other ways can be trying, and this takes a bit of time, is helping them understand that there are different ways you can win.
So I was just watching those videos, made me think that it would be quite nice to start the match saying it's 10-10, and there's different ways in which they could score 1, 2, 5 points for different things. Then suddenly it becomes less about, you know, because what will happen at the end of one of my matches in a training session, that is when they're losing, the stronger players will just try and run from the back to the front and score a goal, because they realise that passing to the weaker players isn't getting them the result they need. Whereas if I can introduce some of those extra point scoring games that you just showed the videos for, then suddenly they could pass to somebody for somebody else to score who's on 3 point, who's a 3-point person, and then suddenly it opens the game wide open. So I'm definitely going to take some of those alternative point scoring things and see if I can make that work.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. It's just see if you can make it work. An alternative scoring method to the 3-2-1 is you say to, let's say you're playing, I don't know, 3v3 matches or 4. You say, right, each team has 10 points to divide amongst their team members. Yeah. So somebody can be worth a 1, somebody could be worth a 4. And I know it takes away from this, everybody starting on an equal platform. Yeah. But it really gets them to actually go, do you know what? I'm going to give you 4 points. And I'm going to take 1, but if I keep scoring, I've got to score 4 times before to match somebody else's points that's worth 4. Yeah. So there's just different ways that you might get a slightly different outcome to the 3-2-1 game, but again, it's like you just said, it's just trying it slightly differently to show that there are different ways to win, not just scoring the most goals, which I know is slightly more unrealistic to the full game. But if we're trying to teach them around competitiveness and linking that in, it doesn't take it away, it helps them channel it in different directions.
I think it comes to those life lessons as well of how we win graciously and we lose graciously of that. And I definitely had to do a lot of work with some of my players around that ultimately, I know it's worrying you now, but your body language and how it affects you is, and you've got to show that in the right way. And that's a really important lesson for some of our young people to learn, is how do I conduct myself in these situations? And if we can embed that in our sessions, that can really make a big difference to them, not just in the football, but for life lessons as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you want to do this next one, Joe, or should we start to... Oh, is she still there? She disappeared.
Sorry. I think we can wrap it up actually, because what I was going to do is just draw a few practices on the screen, but we've actually talked through quite a lot of different ideas. The only other one I was thinking of, Phil, around what you're saying is if the scoring of a physical goal, so, you know, the ball hitting the back of the net, is something that they're really keen on, is that bring the goal into other parts of your sessions as well. So just because it's not a match end to end, can they have a goal to score in another activity? And again, because what it does is it draws the importance away from scoring it in that situation, and it can sometimes take some of the I can't think of the word. Some of the takes away the importance of scoring it in that match, but actually I can score in lots of different ways in lots of different games.
Okay.
Just other things to try.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Phil, sorry, another thing I've tried before is throwing match scenarios at them. Say like it's a cup final, 5 minutes to go, you're winning 3-1. You know, what are you going to do? So it might change their mindset as to, right, I don't think I will attack to score more goals. I'll defend our lead a little bit. So scenarios in the, or can I keep the ball? You know, we're 3-1 up. Can we keep the ball? Stop them getting it, scoring it, and letting us win.
Yeah, the thing I found actually that is most effective is every time a goal is scored, I kind of swap a player over. So suddenly they don't have an affiliation with one particular side or the other. They kind of all end up coming off the pitch, and they've all been winning, leading, scoring, losing at some point during the game. And they don't start the game necessarily with the same people so they don't end the game with the same people that they start with, and then it does kind of detract from it a little bit. So that's been quite helpful occasionally. But yeah, no, I'll have a think. Thank you.
I really like that idea as well. That's a nice one. So I was going to just make the suggestion about the having 2 games going simultaneously, and the combined scores on the pitches make up the different results as well. That can be a nice way of doing it, and then have players switching between the pitches. So again, there's no that real lack of affinity with the teams, and they can move from one pitch to the other depending on the score line, and to win they've got to win on both pitches, and it really adds a different element to it as well.
Yeah, that's a good one, thank you.
Brill. Okay, so we've shared for you in the chat box the links for the 2 games that we've used. One links to the boot room, the other one is another website that has got a whole host of information on it. There's loads on the link that is currently on the screen as well. The foundation phase area of the boot room, there is a link to loads of Pete's games, which can be so beneficial, looking at both arrival activities through to things that you can do into sessions, to games with constraints that we've shown you towards the end. What we're really hoping from today is that this has whetted your appetite a little bit. We are coming out of this post-COVID world, and hopefully we will be able to come and do some face-to-face sessions on the grass with you, where we can really show you some of these games in real life. So please keep a lookout. James will be sharing some of those future dates in and around what this looks like, and hopefully we can see you in real life to share some of these games and ideas, and work with some of your teams to bring out some of these foundation phase key messages with you. But from me, just a big thank you for joining us this evening. We really appreciate you giving up your time, and there's been some really great conversations about how you guys do things in your own individual areas, and I think it's just a great way to share some practice between yourselves. So big thank you from me, and thank you for your engagement for tonight. And I'll hand over to Jo for the last little bit.
Yeah, same for me really. It's been I always love it when you get people to share some of their experiences, and that's always the most important thing here, that even though we're all in the foundation phase, it's relating it to your context and your players, and I think that's the thing that I would just leave you with is to find as many different ways as you can to connect with your players. How well do you understand them? Because that will really help you to shape some of the sessions that you do, some of the practices that you do in this post-COVID world. I don't know how long we're going to keep calling it that, but definitely connect with them as much as you can, and don't feel like you have to rush into what might be coming into next season. Amanda said it already, the game sometimes is the best teacher. So even if they go into their new format or their new formation in the new season, it's all right if they get it wrong. The first few games is fine. They're going to get it. So don't feel that they have to be absolutely ready for the start, because sometimes the game is the best way they're going to learn. But it's been great to connect with you all. Like Amanda says, hopefully we'll be able to see you face to face and bring some of this stuff to life. Any questions following tonight? I'd happily put my email in the chat box just for you if you've got any questions or any follow up or anything like that. But like Amanda says, look out for some more communication from James and the team at Northants FA for the upcoming sessions as well. But that's it for me. I don't know, James, if you wanted just to tie it up, or if not, I hope you all enjoy the rest of what's left of your evening, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.